my idea or big theory about peer review is really that you're trying to locate things in somebody's essay, right? You're trying to see if things are there or not. Um, all right, so here's this form. So you put your name, you put the writer's name. So the thesis statement, basically I'm asking you to copy and paste from their essay into this form. You're looking for the thesis statement. And then you're answering some questions. Is this thesis statement the last sentence of the introduction paragraph? Okay, that's not like a real, like, I don't know, a rule. It's not like a grammar rule that must be followed at all times. You can have the thesis in different places. It's just common, traditional, easier to have it at the end of the introduction. So anyway, you're saying yes or no, whether it is last sentence of the introduction or not. Does the thesis include a reference to the narrative paradigm? Does it have something about narrative paradigm, the storytelling elements in it? Does the thesis refer to a traditional narrative of some sort? So you're doing yes, no's, trying to make the writer aware of whether they have these things or they do not. So based on your reading, meaning the reading of your partner's essay, I just want you to explain briefly what your partner's traditional narrative is. Like, what is it, right? We can do that probably in 1 to 2 sentences. So you read their essay and then you go, okay, according to what I read, the traditional narrative that they're talking about is this, and you describe it a little bit. And then it's basically you're trying to grab the first sentences. So the first sentence, so that we just went through the introduction up here, general, what is the traditional narrative. Now you're looking for the first sentence of the second paragraph, and you copy and paste it here. And then you answer these questions. Is this a topic sentence, right? Is the first sentence a topic sentence or not? Meaning, does it introduce the main idea that the paragraph's going to deal with? Does this sentence include a reference to the narrative paradigm? Does it include a reference or refer to the traditional narrative? Yes and no, right? So again, so you're doing that for these 3 things because the idea is you have 3 main points or 3 main ideas or whichever. So I'm just having you pull the actual first sentence from the paragraphs. Something to do before this, actually, while I'm pairing people up, if you want to look over your actual essay that you submitted and you want to make sure that it's broken into paragraphs, right? Because sometimes people do rough drafts and it's like one long paragraph and it's a rough draft. But in order for people to help you, you want to at least indicate, yep, this is where my first idea is, this is where my second is, where my third is. So if you want to do that and resubmit it to Canvas, like in the next, 15 minutes or so, that would probably be good. And then I'll download whatever I find in 15 minutes and then go through it. And then assign them to people. Okay, so you've got your thesis, you got your 3 topic sentences you're looking at to decide whether they are. So you're copying and pasting one passage from the essay where your partner uses information from one of their sources, right? So at some point, someplace, your partner is using research from some other source, right? They're quoting somebody, right? Or they're using data. So you're basically grabbing that, copying and pasting it here. And then you're answering the questions about it, right? So, and remember, this is about, we did this with quotes before, but that you're trying to make sure that you set up the quote, that you lead up to it, that you present it, and then you also use APA format, and you explain, like you have a sentence afterwards that explains the meaning of either the quote or the data, whatever you've presented. And then a question about whether do you understand how this particular passage connects to the essay's main idea, right? Or main thesis, something like that. Okay, this is sort of a fun one. Well, just because, you open their essay, you have their essay open, you do Control F to find, and basically I just want to know how often these 4 words are used: narrative, story, plot, setting, character. Right? You don't even have to separate them out. You don't have to be like narrative was 7 and story was once whatever. I want to know altogether these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, I guess. How often are they used? And you just put the number over here. And then how many times in the essay are the words change or changing? And I put similar terms, like I was stuck for thinking of synonyms for changing. I don't know, transitioning, something like that. You're trying to count how often these are used in the essay, and you're trying to put them over here. Like the number, that's it. And then I wanted to have, this is all for a purpose, and you can be doing this as you're reading it if you want. I wanted you to basically in the margins, and I said you could use like a little check mark that's blue, or just color your language blue and like just type in traditional or trad or whatever. I just want to, like in the margins of their essay, whenever they're talking about and referring to the traditional narrative, you just want to mark that, right? So you can create a check mark. You might even be able to copy and paste. Wait, I'll save this as a, I wonder if I don't know, it's a Microsoft thing. Let me see if it, yeah, it might. Okay. I'll save this and share this as a Google Doc, because right now I think the only thing I have uploaded is the Microsoft Word. And then essentially, so you got blue check marks to show where traditional narrative is being discussed. You're circling in red, or using the color red, when the writer, your partner, is referring to the newer or the changing narrative, right? Then you're adding them up. How many check marks are there? How many like red circles are there? Here's the idea. If you have made any red circles, I want you to explain to your partner that this essay should only focus on the traditional narrative. Right? So you're going to write a couple sentences that say basically what I just said. Meaning, if you are finding these, they need to remove them and make sure that this entire thing stays focused on the traditional narrative. Right? Because I've split this up. There's 2 parts to this sort of essay, I guess. But anyway, the traditional narrative is the literature review, and it's all about the traditional narrative. And there's no talking about the change or any of it. That's for the final essay that we're going to be doing. All right, so I'm really trying to get people, and what I'm hoping that this does is it forces people to really focus on and investigate what the traditional narrative is of their subject, whatever they're going to say it is, right? And find information about it and talk about it. And then they'll shift their attention to the changing, and will be plenty to talk about that. But in order to go in depth, I'm trying to impose these limits. If I said just write about how the narrative's changing, everybody would write 3 pages about how here's what it was and here's what it is now. So we're trying to go in deeper just by sort of dividing them. So blue check marks, red circles, you can copy and paste them from this. Let me share if you want. You just need to indicate to them how many times you found it. Okay, and then the very last thing is you're going to give them 3 suggestions to help them go deeper into the traditional narrative. Let's see. So the question is, can we talk about the beginning of the change in our conclusion? Yeah, that's not bad. Well, because the theory, the idea is one of the parts of the conclusion for this is you indicating what you're going to be researching and dealing with in the future. So absolutely, right? That's probably the one place that it makes any sense. You would say, I did all this, and then my research will now focus on showing how it changes and what the consequences are and so on. So the answer is yes, you definitely can talk about it in the conclusion. And then, so 3 suggestions, and like how they can go deeper into the traditional narrative. And I say, you might want to suggest, can they do more about talking about how the narrative came into being? Can they do more about how, like, what the main elements were after it existed? Can they do more about how it was spread, or how what the consequences were? So essentially, you're just trying to. That's my suggestion. You can make other suggestions. I was just trying to help people if they can't think of anything. Pick one of these and say and explain that they need to develop it more so that you understand it better or whatever like that. That's the end of the peer review. Right, so you got a bunch of copying paste